Well, it's nice to be here and to chat to you for the next half an hour. I'll shortly start sharing a screen, which will start the presentation. I'll introduce myself. I'm Peter Kelly. I'm a senior psychologist with the Health and Safety Executive. I've got with me Rob Vondy, who...
Hi there, my name is Rob Vondy. I head up the stress policy team within HSE and work with Peter and other colleagues looking at wider sort of aspects of work-related stress that lead to mental ill health.
He's also my boss, so I need to behave myself. So mindfulness and resilience, question mark, the panacea. Why have I put that there, you might ask? Well, as you'll discover as we go through this presentation, over the last couple of years, there's been a huge move to promote mindfulness and resilience, which on their own, and when you do these practice mindfulness or you teach people resilience, are good, but I question whether or not they're good in isolation. There are certain other things that you need to do as well. I will not have a lot of text, a lot of cartoons and a lot of pictures, and hopefully we'll go through this and you'll see, a story developing as we go. I believe you're from the further education sector, so I'm right. Is that correct? Another yes, a big thumbs up. Okay, so let's get this to work now. I mean, it's interesting. Please don't make me go to school tomorrow about honey, you're the teacher. Okay, there are a lot of teachers, a lot of people that we work with across the FE higher, and one of the general things that comes out is that teachers and schools and universities are suffering a significant problem with work-related stress. So actually you have to go to school because we have a job that's to do, but sometimes we don't feel like that and it becomes overwhelming and we feel like we've got, we just don't want to go into work. Well, when we're like that, we're probably in the domain of stress. Increasingly, we find ourselves being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. And over the course of our life, our working life, there will be times when we feel it's okay to be squeezed in a certain direction. But if we're constantly squeezed, and if we're constantly pushed to our ultimate end, we will find that we end up in this area of work, of this domain of stress. Yeah. It's okay, because if you look at probably one of the reasons why is we have these caseload management systems where we just keep adding files until people fall over. Okay. It's interesting, isn't it, that in the introduction of computers and everything else was supposed to reduce people's demands, but in reality, it's increased their demands. Those of you who possess one of these, nice phone, Samsung phone. Do you know that 28 years ago, we didn't have the capability to take calls on the move? The first emails were 25 years ago. The first spam was 24 and a half years ago. The first BlackBerry was 14 years ago. And the first iPhone was 12 years ago. Okay. Now, in that time, the very way we worked and the way we interact with work has changed. That's one of the things we need to remember. Actually, where we are now, we are controlled at times by these things. Okay, people don't have restrictions on when they use them. They can email you at 1, 2, 3 in the morning. By the way, no one emails me at 1, 2, 3 in the morning because I switch it off as a way of coping in my demands. But so actually, this idea that we can just give people more and more work and they're going to be okay in itself is a fallacy, because we have a finite amount of ability before we will fall over due to the demands being excessive. Often people will talk about stress as like being the jobs just on top of them. But also note this caricature here, his back's bent over. Musculoskeletal disorders or bad backs and work-related stress are connected, and you will see them in a number of situations. How many times do you see people arched over their computer typing away and their shoulders get sore, and they have back problems, or they have problems within their hands. So actually, work-related stress can impact in a physiological way as well as psychologically. So it can have a dramatic effect on people's lives, which we have to try and manage. Fear not, though, because we have the tools. It's a difficult job. You needed a bigger than average stress ball. Okay, how many times do you get a stress ball? Absolutely useless at managing work-related stress. Great for squeezing, but doesn't actually do anything for helping you manage stress. So you can get the bubble wrap. Bubble wrap's very helpful. If you squeeze it, it's very therapeutic, the feeling, the noise that you get out of it. Not necessarily the most effective anti-stress technique I could recommend, although I do personally enjoy squeezing a bit of bubble wrap at the end of the day when I'm feeling slightly stressed out, but that might be more to do with the fact I like the noise that it makes people turn around and go, what are you doing? But actually, I'm trying to make light. Stress is a serious problem. It has serious consequences. So we have to continue to look at ways to help people. That might include offering massage to people. Ultimately, the teachers' union agreed to a lesser pay increase in exchange for a full-time massage therapist in the faculty lounge. One could enjoy a bit of massage. All of these things are tertiary interventions. By tertiary, they're at the lowest level of intervention. They're working with the individual. In terms of managing stress, you've got tertiary, secondary, and primary. Primary is addressing stress or promoting mental health at an organizational level. Secondary is training people around the ability to do certain tasks and how to manage people better. And tertiary is massage and interventions which are focused at the individual level. We at HSC promote and look to organizational measures whilst acknowledging that tertiary measures can be useful, but not in isolation. They have to be a part of a wider program of work that the organization is doing. But what do we know about the current situation? There are some challenges, but there are also some unique opportunities. These the wonderful devices that we have here can be used in a way and can be used effectively to improve our health and our well-being. When they're used properly, they can, as I've already said, be a source of tremendous difficulties with work-related stress. I recently was sharing at a conference about how we once asked a company to trace an email that was sent at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. The last known response to it was 3 o'clock on the Saturday morning. When you looked at the response, it wasn't very good. And when we asked the individual that had done the email, I said to him, "Where were you?" He says, "I was in a club." And I said, why did you answer your work's email at 3 o'clock in the morning? He said, "Because I felt I had to." And I said, "But did you actually read what you wrote?" And he went, "Yeah." And I said, "What did you think?" He said, "It wasn't very good." So the point is, we need to learn to control these things. We need to learn how to say no, and it's okay that we don't answer an email at 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, that actually we have time out where we have it for our family. So the challenges are we've accepted technology into our lives, but what we didn't and haven't done is put restrictions on how that technology works. So why then should you be expected to respond to an email that you got at 12 o'clock at night? Reality is, less than 15 years ago, you wouldn't have been able to receive that email. Now, was there a crisis at the time? Did companies, did organizations go bust? Did education systems fall apart? No. It worked because people had to wait for a response, and we had to do things. So it's about recognizing that you can control some of these things. There's a company, one of the large companies in Germany, they now switch their emails off at 7 o'clock on a Friday night. Has the company gone bust? No. Have they lost loads of staff? No, they've actually recruited more staff. Why? Because people have time out and quality time. And we need to get back to that. We need to get back to where we know it's good to have time out, because that improves people's mental health and well-being. To either go for a walk, go to the pub. In my case, I like to go to the pub. That's how I relax. But I walk my dog, and occasionally I go running. And these are all things I do to help me relax. Ultimately, the way people are working has changed as well, because in 30 years ago, we wouldn't have had the level of computerization that we've had. We had physical industries where people were working in long hours and working on very physical activities, whereas now we've got less robust physical activities are happening in work. Lots of mental activities going on through interactions with computers or with their phones, with colleagues and that. And I think it's time to take a stock take and to go back and think, what should we do that we're doing now? How can we do it differently so we can improve people's mental health and well-being? Why does HSC do this area of work? Well, 500,000 people were suffering from work-related stress in 2015 to 16. 45% of all working days lost is due to work-related stress. 30% of all work-related ill health cases is there, and 5.2 billion, 11.7 million working days lost. Okay, this is a problem. Do not have anyone says that we don't have a problem. We do have a problem. We have a problem with stress. We have a problem with stress that's increasing, and it's going up. Now, when we first started out on this journey in managing work-related stress, I didn't talk about the management standards. In 2003, there were 13.9 million days lost to work-related stress. By 2009, we were 9.4 million days lost to work-related stress. In those 6 years, we were actively involved in promoting work-related stress from a HSC perspective. We took a decision in 2009 to step out of the arena and to allow organisations to take on board the training and the information that we give them and to continue the good progress that they've made. 2009, the biggest global recession hits, and obviously very challenging times. And we moved, people moved away from looking at how do I manage people's mental health and their stress to other areas. But what we found is, in its place, there's been a growth in tertiary interventions. Now, prior to 2003 and in the 90s, we taught people to cope with work-related stress and cope with their mental health. The last 3 years, we've heavily gone back into, and not we, but the UK PLC, to teaching people how to manage their mental health and well-being. The promotion of resilience and mindfulness is what we will talk about later. So during that time, we're beginning now to see a small increase again. And why? Because I think the focus is out of kilter. If you want to promote mental health and you want to reduce work-related stress, they have to go hand in hand. You have to seek to address work-related stress in the workplace in order to actually address and promote mental health in the workplace. So the management standards looked at 6 areas of work. These are the 5, but here's the 5 steps of a risk assessment. Standard risk assessment for work-related stress, or for any work-related issues that you're risking, that you're doing a risk assessment against. The key area here is number 3, evaluate the risk. Find out where the risks are and have conversations, which is record your findings, number 4, with your employees and work together, okay? we've got out of this position where, I'm just going to have a quick drink. We've got in this position where we've stopped consulting our employees, and then when we go to do wellbeing programs or we do a piece of work with them, they go, well, they're not really engaged in what we're doing, but we've actually stopped talking on this area with people, and we have to get back to talking to employees about what causes work-related stress in their life, and how this work-related stress element leads to poor mental health, which reduces the chance of your mental health and well-being programs being effective if you're not actually managing the sources of stress at the same time. The management standards have 6 areas: demands, control, role, relationships, support, and change. They are 6 parts of business. They are 6 parts of FE. They are 6 parts of the NHS. They are 6 parts of local government. These 6 principles work. High demands, low control, low support is the demands, control, support model for Karasek, which is one of the primary models in understanding how stress can be defined. So commonly you find these 6 characteristics in work-related stress cases. Where you have the combination of high demands, low control, low support, then in all probability you will have people going off, because the organisation isn't managing the demands or allowing the individual to have control. And furthermore, there's no support to mitigate that situation. People go off. So effectively, if you want to look at mental health and you want to look at the promotion of health and well-being, you have to address what's happening fundamentally on the shop floor through work-related stress. Addressing and promoting the prevention of work-related stress will lead to the promotion and of mental health in the workplace. Ultimately, we're looking for workplaces that are mentally healthy. Why shouldn't you, in the 21st century, go into a workplace and come away from it feeling healthy? Someone please tell me why it's okay to make people ill on a perfectly preventable condition if we choose to look beyond looking at the individual and work with the individual and the organisation in managing those areas. So for me, there's a bit of a balance and an imbalance going on here. So for me, I think at the moment it feels a little bit imbalanced. Why? Because resilience seems to be here, and that you need to be resilient to all the adversity that's coming along in your life. Yeah. But the point is that resilience is fine if you are equally organisationally resilient. So if you are individually resilient, you're going to go back to an organisation that's going to say, we're just going to carry on doing what we do, but we're not going to change the way we work. And actually, resilience will only be a sticking plaster for a period of time, until eventually people become ill because they can't face the adversity and they can't face what's going on. So if you're going to make people resilient, make your organization resilient, okay? And if your organization's resilient and your individuals are resilient, then you're in a winning scenario. Don't just do one without doing the other. How do you make an organization more resilient? You get them to manage work-related stress. You get them to promote mental health in the workplace. You get them to look at the way work is designed and the jobs are designed. It's interesting because how many people actually know what resilience means? I spoke at a conference. There was 450 people there. Conference was on resilience, and I asked them, what does resilience mean? No one could actually give me an answer, but it's a term that we use a lot, isn't it? We want you to be resilient. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean I have to cope with everything that's thrown at me? Or does that mean I'm supposed to sort of come into work and be positive all the time? What does it actually? The reality is resilience is about that capability to do the job that you're doing with the resources that you've got. Yeah. And actually, it's about realizing that the organization and you are in partnership to be resilient. Resilient organizations survive. And why? Because they're looking all the time to work better and improve the way that they work. to make them stronger. Then we've got the new movement towards mindfulness. Today I will live in the moment, unless the moment is unpleasant, in which case I will eat a cookie. Okay. It's humorous, but the point I'm trying to share it here is that mindfulness is okay on its own, but if you then go back to an organization and say, we're making you mindful to do your job, but we're not actually going to change your job, we're not going to recognize that something about your job may not be healthy for you, then teaching someone mindfulness just reinforces in their mind how bad their job is, and which is not what you're trying to do in mindfulness training. You're trying to get people to realize that they can see their way through the problems that are there, but they can't see their way through the problems that are there on their own. They have to have an organization and an individual fit. So I'm in no way disparaging of mindfulness, but I can see its effectiveness, I can see its benefit, I can see the benefit of resilience training. All I'm saying is that if you singly focus on mindfulness and not on these other areas or on resilience, then you will have you'll have difficulty. Okay, so do them both. Be organizationally resilient, be mindful as an organization of what you need to do to make your workplace better for the people that are there. Look at how job design is implemented and let your people that are working for you guide you in what helps them to do the job better. So is the balance and imbalance there? I think we need to shift it back. Hopefully we need to say, we'll do resilience, we'll do mindfulness, but it's not the panacea. On its own, it simply helps at an individual level. Combine it with organizational interventions, such as the management standards, such as mental health promotion campaigns, health and well-being, then I think you begin to get a more balanced lifestyle and a more balanced approach to tackling it. Mental health and well-being as a concept is fully and utterly embedded in the psyche of business at the moment, and it will be around for a number of years. In that time, however, we need to be constantly looking to how we promote it and how we encourage its use. And I'm particularly hopeful that the balance will shift back to both organization and the individual. Health and well-being, it's all about the fruit, isn't it? You talk to people about health and well-being, they say, oh, fruit, pears, apples on the table. Actually, for most people, their experience of health and well-being is this. I'll read it out, but you should be able to see it. Tomorrow is the mandatory meeting on employee health and well-being. The meeting starts at 6 a.m., so it will interfere with your sleep and not your work. Doesn't that send a message that work is more important than health? I hope so. That's the theme of the meeting. And actually, I've shared this a number of times with people at conferences, and they go, well, yeah, ain't that true? They actually, health and well-being seems to be an add-on, not something you should be fundamentally doing in your workplace to make it a more healthier and more balanced workplace. And actually, it shouldn't be at 6 o'clock before the start of the meeting. It needs to be integrated in the outcomes of that organization. It needs to be a key performance indicator that you look after the organization. There's a very simple motto here: look after your people and they will look after you. If you don't look after your people, then the organization will not prosper and will have problems. Successful companies all have health and well-being in place. The top 100 companies in the Times 500 to work for all have health and well-being. And they don't just give apples and oranges, they take it to another level, on different levels, looking at job design, how the work's put together, engagement with staff, promotion of mental health, and physical health interventions. This makes good business sense. and we have to continue to encourage those organisations. And it makes good businesses in any environment, in FE, in the healthcare, local government, and in the banking sector. I work with the financial sector, and they realise that if you look after the people, they're going to look after their business, which makes them more profitable. And we need to remember that if we're working in sectors where, such as the ones that we do, we have chosen vocational careers. I've chosen to be a civil servant. It's a vocational career. I don't choose it for the money. I choose it because of what I like to do. I want to make a difference to the people that I work with. And in those areas, we're more susceptible to work-related stress because it's a vocation. Because actually, when something goes wrong, we don't just feel that we're failing ourselves. We feel we're failing the people that we're trying to help out. In the case of the FE sector, it's the students and that. So it's important to remember that health and well-being and the promotion of positive health and well-being is really important. And that if people are healthy and well, then they'll have fulfilled jobs. So ultimately, the fruits, there they are: bananas, apples, pears, and orange. Doesn't matter what amount of fruit you eat on its own, it's going to be good for you because it's 5 fruits that you should have every day. But actually, it's everything else that goes on top. Have the fruit. Look at the way the work's organised. Promote mental health. Look to reduce work-related stress. Give the whole package together. One of the interesting things I get told is stress is a recent phenomenon, and mental health is recent phenomena. And I went, why would you say that? What happens if you were a priest during the Reformation? I think that would be stressful. Or if you were down in the mines when that canary keeled over and died in the middle of the tunnel, probably stressful, probably not the most helpful environment. So let's be clear. Work stress and work-related stress has been around and will continue to be around. What's changed, I think, in the last 20 plus years is that we've got a number of different sources of stress now that we didn't have in the past. You can't just when you worked in the mines, you could work out of the mine and the job would finish there, wouldn't it? You're out of the mine and then you're back home. In a lot of jobs with IT and with phones and that, we don't have those switch off points again. So our health and our well-being become impacted by that. And that's why the promotion of mental health and well-being is such pivotal importance for the government and an area that we ourselves look to make sure that we promote positive health and well-being. And we want people to be mentally and physically healthy in work, because you've seen the statistics, 11.9 million days. When we were down at 9 million less than 6 years ago, that's what we need to be getting back to. We're much more active in the area now than we have been in the past. And because we've chosen to come back, because you told us we want you to look at work-related stress, we want to look at mental health and well-being. And that's what we're doing. And hopefully that helps. And ultimately, we're going to look at getting the balance right, aren't we? So actually, you've got activities that counter the activities that you're at work. And why not do these activities that we've got here, cycling and walking, as part of what you do anyway? That actually, some of the innovative companies, I worked across Europe with their campaign for looking at how to manage stress and mental health. And they have innovation across the multiple sectors, including FEs, where they're doing something different, where they're actually cycle to work schemes, walking clubs during the day, staff councils where they're meeting together and talk. But really, I want us to be in a position where we do the things that balance out that quality of life issue. Yeah, you weren't paid to work 24/7. It might come as a surprise to you, but go and look at your contract, and your contract has a set amount of hours. And actually, you're paid to work those hours. Let's make those hours effective hours as we can be, and realize that the longer that we allow a creep in of emails, of telephone calls, of extended hours, the less effective we become. we're affected because as human beings, we have a set period of time when we're totally 100% effective. Then there's a period after where we become less effective because fatigue and other things set in. Okay. And lastly, do you mean to tell me that a stress ball isn't for throwing at people who stress you out? Okay. I have 36 of these, so you're welcome to come past my table at any time. If you're ever in Bootle, and have a look at my 36 different stress balls. Not one of them, I might add, is a stress ball, because I just don't. You can get stress balls everywhere. I've got a stress submarine. I've got stress doctors and nurses, amongst other things. But actually, do you know what? Squeezing a ball isn't going to help your mental health or your work-related stress. And that leaves us, that's my last slide, and that leaves us for a time for questions. Let me ask the question of the people that are participating. What's your personal experience of health and well-being programs in work?
Okay, well, I've got a new line manager now who is, her past experiences in health and mental health, and it's made such a difference to my work, because she understands that there are limitations as to how much time we can spend on email and checking for emails and doing everything. As you say, we're not paid to work 24/7, and it's made a big difference with her understanding of this to my work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and does it feel hard?
What, my work?
Yeah.
My work? I love my work, so it isn't actually hard.
But what she's asking you to do is she's giving you control.
Yes, absolutely. And she says, I'll be guided by your comments, you know?
Yeah.
And she is, and she acts on it.
Yeah.
And I think she's very good in that aspect.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I think effective commitment from leaders and organisations, but engaging managers who take that approach and can see the benefits of engaging people in the right way, giving them the opportunity to sort of do their thing and be supportive. I'd just like to ask a question about if there has been any, if delegates sort of who are viewing today have seen any good examples of the balanced approach that Peter's described, this holistic approach of getting the organisational focus right and supporting that with the secondary and tertiary activities.
Again, in training week, during training week, we have several sessions on not only how to live our life well, our private life and our eating habits, etc., balancing it with exercise, but also we have a session on mental health and how to recognise the symptoms of people who may be very stressed in our classes as well.
Mm-hmm.
And which is interesting. You know, for example, a younger person may start picking their skin or pulling their hair or twirling their hair and pulling it unnecessarily hard, or being very quiet or changing their personality. You can see a change in they may become very quiet and subdued, etc. We get information on that apart from what I do privately.
Yeah.
We do have a question in the chat, which is, how do you cope when there is nobody else to delegate to whilst the workload increases due to budget costs?
You raise that. You have to raise that with those people that are implementing the budget cuts. And the problem is, people say, "Well, I'll give you this workload. I'll give you this workload," but actually, physiologically, mentally, the concept of giving it to me to such a level that there is no one else to delegate. At that point, you should be having the conversations with the employer, because actually at that point you're on the cusp of high demands with absolutely no control. An organisation says we'll give you more and more work, but then doesn't actually reflect their own duty of care, which is to look after the employees. Then you have to raise that, because the health and safety law requires that organisation to manage that risk to your health. Now, that's a red flag when they're saying, we'll give you all this work, but we're not going to give you anything else. And it literally puts them in a position of saying, well, I'm telling you what you're doing here is ineffective, is actually making me ill, and therefore I have to do something about it. Because they're not going to be there when you go ill. Do you see what I mean? Because they'll keep applying the pressure, and then they go, oh, he's gone. And then they've really got a problem because they've lost your expertise, they've lost your knowledge, and actually an early conversation like now to say, I can't do this. This is too much workload. It will lead to me suffering from or experiencing symptoms of stress. And I might very well end up going off because it's too much. That's the conversations that you're entitled to have and should be having with your employee. And if they ignore it, you've registered it, you've told them, you've said, I can't do any more. So, but that helps. I get this all the time. It's like, so at which point does your duty of care not become your duty of care? You know, your employer has legislation that requires them to look after your health, not just your safety, but your health.
Many people may be too scared in the current climate of gig economy and precarious job contracts to raise this with their employer.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the thing that people have said. 10 years ago, when I first, well, I've been doing this 20 years, oh God, I'm so old. But, you know, 15 years ago and 10 years ago, you'd never hear people say, I'm suffering from stress at work, ever. You know, you wouldn't you could go to the pub and people would never actually acknowledge that. For a point of reference, I don't go to the pub all the time. I might use it as an example, but now I do go to the pub and people do talk about stress and they're experiencing stress at work. So I think that perhaps there's less stigma out there. I accept that you put your head above the parapet, but you know about if you say, well, this is a problem, where are you going to be when you're off with stress? When actually you're at home, you're unable to come out of your house. In some cases, you spend a minimum of 6 weeks in most instances away from work. In reality, some go up to 6 months to 12 months. And that's 12 months of your life that actually could have been better spent because you were able to go back and say to them, this is too much. People talk about the pressure cooker and it's building up, and you know, I'll just add a little bit of steam. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. All those scenarios, yeah. The cat is truly out of the bag. The steam has come off the steamer. Okay, there is a problem with stress. It is a part of work. We cannot get to the position where we go, oh, it's okay, we're not going to talk about it. We have to talk about it. If we had the same position on asbestos, people would still be dying of asbestosis. If it was, and actually, there are some really good examples of leaders of multinational organizations who've gone off and experienced depression. Has the company gone bust? No. One of them, the Danish Prime Minister, was off with depression for 6 weeks. The country carried on running. They didn't know he had depression. The cabinet met at his house. Do you know what kind of actually that experience to say it's okay, people can be supported through that. So that's one of my little Hyde Park moments. I'm passionate that we shouldn't, this concept that we should shy away because the only person that benefits from that is somebody else, not the individual that's suffering.
And where, I suppose in the FE sector, like education throughout, it's sort of heavily unionised. They have the procedures and the approaches in place. The backstop is a requirement by employers to consult on health and safety issues. So there should be open discussion taking place. And where an individual is suffering, they should have recourse to a representative, whether it's a trade union rep or an employee rep, to raise this as a general concern so they're not being identified. So there are ways and means of circumventing that fear factor. And I would say in FE, as in higher education and education generally speaking, those mechanisms are there to be used for that purpose. And I can understand how people would feel that way inclined, that they're putting their heads above that parapet to be sort of shot at. but it can be done in another way. And I think the FE sector and education generally are well served to be able to make that happen.
There is another comment in the chat, and that is that I work a lot with organizations training mental health and well-being, and more often than not, it is the HR processes that become a barrier to some senior management teams making changes.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
This has been an area that they've ducked and dived on between health and safety and HR. I personally believe, and I say this to my own HR department, it's a combination. Actually, this is too big a wide an area to just be isolated with one person. The direct impact is that stressed people or people with who are suffering from mild mental health conditions will engage in activities and work which are a health and safety issue. So you've got to manage that. Fatigue. The consequences of fatigue is errors, and errors can have dramatic effects in the right environment. How many times when you're stressed coming home from work, you're driven in the car and you're like, how have I done that? How have I got here? What happened? But you have. But the point is that actually we can. We have to be clear with both HR and health and safety that you've got to combine this together. You get them together, you've got a really good connection. You get them fighting against each other, and it's a problem. And we come across this a lot. So,
Peter, someone has asked if you could give some good examples of organizations where staff well-being is really embedded that others could learn from or replicate.
Okay. Well, have a look at the Times 100 and look at the top Times 500 companies to work for. Look at the top 100 and you'll see examples of health and well-being in there. The other one is if you, I'm going to spell this out, or you can write this down, EUOSH, so EU OSHA, and it's the EU OSHA psychosocial, it's a great set of words, psychosocial risk campaign 2014-15. I was the jury chair for good practice for that, and in there is over 25 examples of companies that have implemented mental health and well-being programs. Some of them are large ones and some of them are small ones, and at least two of them I know are either university or FE. So it's really being really creative with what you do. It's not just apples, it's not just pears or bananas, it's actually about engagement. And I mean, it's funny, Rob was head of engagement, weren't you?
Yes. Yeah.
And I did, well, isn't that just teaching people to talk, Rob?
Yeah.
Isn't that what Bob Hoskins would say? It's good to talk. Because actually it is good to talk. And do you need to train people how to talk? Well, some people you might, because they're shy and they don't listen. But actually, we've all got one of these, and we've all got this. We can listen and we can hear, and that's the starting of the conversation around health and well-being, isn't it?
I think in a lot of organisations, it's providing the space for the conversations to take place. I think it's fundamental. Yes, you should be communicating, you should be consulting, but very often it's where is the space provided for that. And just going back to the HR and the health and safety sort of management, my background is with ACAS before I joined HSE. And very often, and I think it's still the same today, and we're trying to do things to change this within HSE, but HR and health and safety issues are not taken seriously. They're not a feature at board level engagement and discussion. They're certainly not a permanent agenda item that should be there, when it's organisations at the highest level are demonstrating their commitment to doing the right thing. Now, we're working closely with CIPD at the moment, and the goal here is to embed good practice around health and health management within the HR profession. So we realise there's a lot of work to be done still in that area. And that's why we work quite closely hand in glove almost with ACAS, because very often these issues will manifest themselves as an employment relations problem. And ACAS do a lot of work in providing training and support and advice around managing stress. So I think it doesn't answer it doesn't solve the problem directly, but I think we're trying to do our bit to join up the support that's available, but also to influence and secure commitments from that HR community that they have to take this seriously. And the impact, as Peter's described earlier, of days lost because of action not being taken, which could be taken quite straightforwardly. It's an indictment on the businesses of the UK, and that's all organisations, whether it's the private or public sector.
Okay. There are some comments that have come, I'm aware that they've come directly to me, so I'll just share those, and that is that much of further education is not heavily unionised. Independent training providers, for example, and apprenticeships in all sectors, so there are some issues there. And a colleague has also asked if how does this link with the equalities in the workplace and with the duty with regards to the Equality Act?
Well, the presence of work-related stress leads to depression and anxiety, and depression and anxiety are covered under the Equality Act after a period of 12 months. Given that even if people suffer depression and anxiety and they're back in work within, say, 6 months, they have rights under the Equality Act, which mean that they need to be managed, and suitable adjustments need to be made to their workplace. Employers do try and cop out a little bit by saying, well, it's under 12 months. And actually, it doesn't, for me, it's about that actually you need to put in reasonable things to place. So it fully fits under the Equality Act, and which I'm thankful that it's there, and perhaps should be used more often than it actually is. And what was the first one before? I've got the questions up here, but you remember?
I think the first one was about sort of, trade unions might not have a presence in some areas of FE. Well, the backstop is that there's a requirement in employment law to consult with your employees, and that's a general rider, but there is health and safety legislation that requires consultation with employees, whether there's union representation there or not. So there is recourse. If that's not happening, then again, the address is to bring that to the attention of the employer. You bring it to the attention. If the employer doesn't sort of respond to that, you can approach ACAS as a conciliator, a mediator, who would come in and look at why that's not happening. And then at the end of the line, then HSE has, as a regulator, enforcement responsibilities where consultation isn't taking place. So there's no hiding place for an employer. They have to consult. I think the problem that probably does exist is employees' understanding and awareness of the fact that that has to take place. So if you don't know, you're not going to raise the issue and you'll feel as though, well, there's nothing I can do here. But there's backstop regulation that would provide the power to take steps to do the right thing.
And the interesting thing here is when we have taken 4 improvement notices, one of them was an FE college.
Could I just make a sort of a plea that moving forward, we have just launched our health and work strategy, which delegates may be aware of. But if you go to our website, hse.gov.uk, you will see on the front page now the Go Home Healthy campaign. That sort of is the overarching message that targets the 3 key priorities in terms of occupational health for HSE at the moment, and that's work-related stress, musculoskeletal disorders, and occupational lung disease. But stress is a priority issue, and it's part of the cornerstone of our new approach. But there's a lot of advice, guidance that will take you to some of the issues we were talking about in terms of consultation and communication and what the duty of an employer is in that regard. So that I think if people have got the understanding and the awareness, they're much better placed to take forward these issues with confidence in their own workplaces.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.